It was a bitterly cold Wednesday evening at Mason's gas station when elderly Mrs. Thompson shuffled in, her hands trembling as she counted loose change from her worn leather purse. The station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her worried face as she approached the counter, where James Carter, the night shift clerk, stood watching with growing concern. I'm sorry, Mrs. Thompson whispered, her voice quavering. I thought I had enough for a gallon of gas. My son is in the hospital, and I need to get there. But she emptied her purse onto the counter, $3.42 in nickels and dimes. The price per gallon was $3.89. Without hesitation, James reached for his own wallet. He had been working double shifts all week, trying to save every penny for his daughter's medication. But something in Mrs. Thompson's eyes, that mix of desperation and dignity, moved him to action. "Ma'am, please don't worry about it," he said softly, swiping his own credit card through the register. "I'll cover a full tank for you." Mrs. Thompson's eyes welled with tears. "Young man, I couldn't possibly." "Please," James insisted, printing the receipt. "Get to your son. That's what matters." What James didn't notice was his manager, Mr. Peterson, watching from the security cameras. As soon as Mrs. Thompson's old Corolla pulled away from the pump, Peterson stormed out of his office, face red with anger. "Carter," he bellowed. "My office, now." 20 minutes later, James stood in the parking lot, holding a cardboard box with his belongings, his termination papers crumpled in his fist. Peterson's words still rang in his ears. "Company policy strictly prohibits employees from manipulating transactions. You're fired, effective immediately." As he walked to his car, the winter wind biting at his face, James wondered how he would explain this to his wife. How they would manage their bills, their daughter's medical expenses. But even as anxiety gnawed at his stomach, he couldn't bring himself to regret helping Mrs. Thompson. What he didn't know was that this act of kindness was about to change his life in ways he could never imagine. James Carter wasn't always a gas station clerk. At 32, he had once dreamed of becoming an architect, even completing 3 years of college before life took an unexpected turn. His daughter Emily's diagnosis with a rare autoimmune condition had changed everything. Medical bills piled up, and dreams of designing buildings gave way to the practical needs of keeping his family afloat. Now, he worked the night shift at Mason's gas station in the outskirts of Cleveland, taking whatever overtime he could get. His small apartment, shared with his wife Sarah and 8-year-old Emily, was filled with more prescription bottles than family photos. The kitchen calendar was a maze of doctor's appointments and payment due dates marked in different colors. His uniform, a blue polo shirt with the Masons logo and khaki pants, had seen better days, but James kept it meticulously clean. Pride was free, his father used to say, and James held on to that lesson tightly. During his shifts, he knew every regular customer by name, remembered their usual purchases, and always offered a genuine smile despite his exhaustion. The job paid $14.50 an hour, barely enough to cover rent, groceries, and the mountain of medical expenses that insurance wouldn't touch. Sarah worked part-time as a virtual assistant while caring for Emily, but it was never quite enough. Each month was a careful dance of juggling bills, deciding which ones could wait and which ones couldn't. Yet despite their struggles, James never let bitterness take root. He kept a small notebook in his pocket, jotting down architectural ideas during quiet moments at work. Sometimes during his breaks, he'd sketch building designs on napkins, holding on to that old dream like a distant star. His coworkers often found him helping elderly customers with their windshield wipers or teaching teenagers how to check their oil levels. Small acts of kindness that cost nothing, but meant everything. What his manager, Mr. Peterson, saw as time-wasting, James saw as community. In a world of quick transactions and cold efficiency, he believed that a little humanity could go a long way. He had no idea that this philosophy, this stubborn insistence on treating people with dignity regardless of his own circumstances, was about to become the cornerstone of an extraordinary change in his life. Margaret Thompson had once been a different woman entirely. At 72, her designer clothes and luxury car had long since been sold off, replaced by threadbare sweaters and a rusting 1998 Toyota Corolla. But it wasn't her own hardships that brought her to Mason's gas station that fateful night. It was her son Michael's battle for life. 3 months ago, Michael, her only child, had collapsed at work. The diagnosis was devastating: stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The aggressive treatments had quickly depleted his savings, and Margaret had already sold everything of value she owned to help. Her retirement fund, carefully built over decades, had been emptied for his first round of experimental treatments. That evening, she had received an urgent call from the hospital. Michael's condition had suddenly deteriorated, and the doctors weren't sure he would make it through the night. With only loose change in her purse and her gas tank running on fumes, she had driven to Mason's, praying she had enough for just 1 gallon to reach the hospital 15 miles away. Her hands shook as she counted the change on the counter, not from age, but from fear. Fear that she would fail her son one final time. Fear that she would miss these crucial moments. The fluorescent lights of the gas station made the tears in her eyes sparkle as she realized she was short by 47 cents. What the kind clerk James didn't know was that Margaret had spent her entire day at various pawn shops, trying to sell her last meaningful possession, her wedding ring from her late husband. But no one would give her more than $50 for it, and she'd used that money for Michael's medications earlier that day. She hadn't eaten in 2 days, saving every penny for gas and medicine. Her own utilities had been shut off the previous week, but none of that mattered. All that mattered was reaching her son, holding his hand, being there if these were indeed his final moments. When James offered to fill her tank, Margaret felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not just in humanity's kindness, but hope that perhaps the universe wasn't solely conspiring against her family. As she drove to the hospital, tears streaming down her face, she made a silent promise that somehow, someday, she would repay this act of kindness. What no one at Mason's gas station knew was that Margaret Thompson had once been Margaret Windsor, and 30 years of carefully hidden history was about to resurface because of one gas station clerk's simple act of compassion. Richard Peterson had managed Mason's gas station for 15 years, and in that time, he'd developed a reputation for running the tightest ship in the district. His small kingdom of fuel pumps and convenience store aisles was governed by an ironclad rulebook, one he'd largely written himself. At 45, divorced twice, and passed over for corporate promotion 3 times, Peterson had turned his frustration into a zealous devotion to policy and procedure. That evening, watching the security cameras from his office, Peterson's face grew increasingly red as he observed James's transaction with Mrs. Thompson. It wasn't just about the money, $47.83 for a full tank of gas. It was about control. It was about rules. Absolutely unacceptable, he muttered, furiously typing notes into his incident report. Unauthorized transaction, potential theft, violation of company policy section 5.3. His fingers stabbed at the keyboard with each point. What really infuriated Peterson wasn't just the violation of policy, it was James's popularity with customers. While Peterson's quarterly reviews consistently showed excellent numbers, his customer satisfaction scores were abysmal. Meanwhile, James, a mere clerk, had a growing pile of positive comment cards from customers, something Peterson had never achieved in his entire career. When he called James into his office, Peterson had already prepared the termination papers. He sat behind his desk, a shrine to mediocre authority with its motivational posters and district manager certificates. "Do you know how many people try to scam us with sob stories?" Peterson lectured, his voice tight with contained anger. "If we helped everyone with a sad story, we'd be out of business. Rules exist for a reason, Carter." James tried to explain about Mrs. Thompson, about her son in the hospital, but Peterson cut him off. "This isn't a charity, it's a business. You used your employee discount card for an unauthorized transaction. That's fraud." What Peterson didn't mention was the email he'd received that morning. Another rejection for a regional manager position. The same position he'd been pursuing for 5 years. The rejection cited his lack of innovative thinking and customer-centric approach, qualities that James seemed to possess naturally. As he watched James clear out his locker, Peterson felt a momentary twinge of doubt. But he quickly suppressed it, telling himself he was just doing his job. He didn't know that his decision would soon make him the subject of viral videos and news reports, or that his by-the-book management style was about to become a case study in everything wrong with modern corporate culture. And he certainly didn't know that his perfect record of rule enforcement was about to collide head-on with something far more powerful: the internet's love for a heartwarming story of human kindness. Judith Carter sat at their kitchen table, staring at the pile of medical bills, while their daughter Sophia slept in the next room. The soft whir of the nebulizer, a sound that had become as familiar as a heartbeat in their home, provided a steady backdrop to her mounting anxiety. A new bill from Cincinnati Children's Hospital had arrived, $4,327 for the last round of treatment. Sophia's rare autoimmune condition, granulomatosis with polyangiitis, GPA, required constant medical attention. At just 8 years old, she could pronounce medical terms that most adults stumbled over, and she knew more about drug interactions than any child should. Her small bedroom wall was covered with drawings of superhero doctors and nurses, her own way of processing the endless hospital visits. That morning had been particularly difficult. Sophia's fever had spiked to 102.3, and her joints were so swollen she couldn't hold her favorite stuffed penguin, Mr. Waddles. Judith had to cancel another freelance writing assignment to take her to the urgent care center. Every canceled job meant less money, but Sophia's needs always came first. The refrigerator held a color-coded medication schedule that looked more like a military operation plan than a child's care routine. Antibiotics at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., immunosuppressants with breakfast and dinner, anti-inflammatory drugs every 4 hours, and a host of supplements in between. Each bottle in their medicine cabinet represented another mountain of debt. James's gas station job had been their lifeline, not just for the modest salary, but critically for the health insurance. Though the coverage was basic, it helped keep Sophia's treatment semi-affordable. They had been 3 months away from better coverage when James would have hit his 1-year mark at Mason's. When James called from the gas station parking lot to tell Judith about his termination, she felt the world spin. Her first thought wasn't about their mortgage, the utilities, or even the stack of unpaid medical bills. It was about the blue bottle of pills in their bathroom cabinet, Sophia's vital medication that would run out in exactly 9 days. "They can't do this," Judith whispered into the phone, her voice breaking as she watched Sophia sleep through the crack in the door. "We were so close to the better insurance coverage." Sophia stirred in her sleep, clutching Mr. Waddles closer, despite her swollen fingers. On her nightstand sat her Brave Girl journal, where she documented every doctor's visit with surprisingly cheerful stickers and drawings. Tomorrow's entry would have been her 147th doctor's appointment. Now it might have to be canceled. What neither Judith nor James knew as they grappled with this crisis was that Sophia's story would soon touch the hearts of thousands of strangers. Their private struggle was about to become a powerful symbol of the broken healthcare system and the true cost of corporate inflexibility. And in less than 24 hours, that mysterious knock on their door would change everything. It was 8:47 p.m. when 3 sharp knocks echoed through the Carter household. James, still in his Mason's uniform from earlier that day, exchanged worried glances with Judith. They weren't expecting anyone, and bill collectors usually didn't come this late. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. Through the front window, they could make out an expensive-looking black town car parked in their driveway, its headlights still warm in the evening darkness. A woman's silhouette stood at their door, elegant despite the late hour. "Mr. Carter? Mrs. Carter? Please, I need to speak with you." The voice was familiar, but somehow different. Stronger, more assured than the trembling whisper from the gas station just hours ago. When James opened the door, he almost didn't recognize Margaret Thompson. Gone were the threadbare sweater and desperate expression. Instead, she stood there in a tailored business suit, her silver hair perfectly styled, looking every bit the executive she had once been. "May I come in?" she asked, holding a leather briefcase that probably cost more than 3 months of James's salary. "There's something I need to tell you both." In their modest living room, with its second-hand furniture and walls covered in Sophia's artwork, Margaret Thompson looked oddly out of place. She sat perched on the edge of their worn couch, eyes taking in the medication schedule on the refrigerator. The pile of medical bills hastily swept to one corner of the coffee table. First, she began, reaching into her briefcase. I want you to know that Michael, my son, is stable. The doctors say he'll make it through the night, through many nights, God willing. And it's because of you, Mr. Carter, that I was there when he turned the corner. She pulled out a manila envelope and a small framed photograph. In the photo, a younger Margaret stood beside a distinguished-looking man in front of a gleaming corporate headquarters. Before I was Margaret Thompson, I was Margaret Windsor, co-founder of Windsor Pharmaceuticals. That company in the picture? I built it with my late husband. We developed life-saving medications, including, she paused, looking at the blue bottle of pills on their counter, including the very medication your daughter takes. James and Judith sat in stunned silence as Margaret continued. 15 years ago, after Thomas, my husband, died, I sold my shares and walked away from everything. I couldn't bear to be in that world without him. I've lived quietly since then, but I've never stopped watching the company we built. And what I saw today at that gas station. She took a deep breath. It reminded me of why we started Windsor Pharmaceuticals in the first place, to help people, not to profit from their suffering. She opened the manila envelope and laid several documents on their coffee table. I still own patents. I still have connections. And more importantly, I still have the power to right some wrongs. As James and Judith looked at the papers before them, their eyes widened. What they were seeing wasn't just help, it was salvation. And it had all started with a simple act of kindness at a gas station. The whir of Sophia's nebulizer from the other room provided a steady rhythm to this surreal moment as their world was about to change forever. Again, but this time for the better. It started with a single TikTok video. One of the regular customers at Mason's gas station had been filling up his car when James helped Mrs. Thompson that fateful night. He captured the moment on his phone, the elderly woman counting change, the kind clerk swiping his own card, the manager watching through the window. The caption was simple. This gas station worker just got fired for helping an elderly woman get to her dying son. #kindness, #corporate, #humanity. Within hours, the video had over 2 million views. By morning, local news vans were parked outside Mason's gas station. The story had everything: a compassionate worker, a heartless corporation, a desperate mother, and an unexpected twist. Channel 5's headline blazed across screens. Local hero fired for act of kindness, the story behind the viral video. Social media exploded with outrage. Twitter users started the hashtag #JusticeForJames, which quickly became the #1 trending topic nationwide. Someone found Peterson's LinkedIn profile, and his inbox was flooded with messages questioning his decision. Mason's gas station's Yelp page was overwhelmed with one-star reviews. The story took an even more dramatic turn when a local business reporter recognized Margaret Windsor's name and dug deeper. The headline in the Business Journal read, "Former Pharmaceutical Executive Returns, the surprising twist in the viral gas station story." National news networks picked up the story, each adding their own angle. CNN, Corporate Policy versus Human Compassion, a Modern American Tale. Fox News, Small Business Regulations, Have We Gone Too Far? MSNBC, Healthcare Crisis Exposed, The Real Cost of American Medicine. A GoFundMe page for Sophia's medical expenses, set up by a community member, reached $50,000 in just 6 hours. Comments poured in from around the world. This happened to my mother last year. We need more people like James. This isn't just about gas money, it's about our humanity. Why does a child's medicine cost more than a car payment? #healthcare reform. The story resonated particularly strongly on LinkedIn, where business leaders and HR professionals debated the balance between policy and compassion. A viral post by a Fortune 500 CEO read, "If your company policy prevents basic human kindness, it's time to change your policy." Margaret's revelation about her identity added another layer of viral interest. Business schools began using the case as a discussion point about corporate responsibility and human-centered leadership. The juxtaposition of her past as a pharmaceutical executive and her current situation sparked intense discussions about healthcare accessibility. Local television crews interviewed Sophia's doctors, who spoke about the challenges families face with chronic conditions. medical advocacy groups used the story to highlight the struggles of families dealing with rare diseases. The media circus reached its peak when a national morning show invited James, Judith, and Sophia to share their story. Sophia, clutching Mr. Waddles, spoke about her Brave Girl journal, moving viewers to tears. The segment ended with a surprise video message from various celebrities offering their support. Meanwhile, Mason's gas station's corporate office remained conspicuously silent, even as their social media accounts were flooded with comments. Peterson had called in sick 3 days in a row, his office dark as reporters waited outside. What began as a simple act of kindness had become a national conversation about healthcare, corporate humanity, and the power of compassion. And somewhere in the whirlwind of media attention, a little girl's chance at a healthy life and a gas station clerk's act of kindness were changing policies and touching hearts across the nation. Mason's gas station's corporate headquarters in Minneapolis was experiencing something unprecedented in its 47-year history. Their social media accounts, typically filled with promotions for their rewards program and coffee deals, had become a battlefield of public outrage. The company's initial response, a terse statement about following established protocols, only fueled the fire. Mason's gas stations maintain strict policies to protect our customers and employees. We cannot comment on individual personnel matters. We stand by our commitment to professional service and regulatory compliance. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Corporate communication experts called it a masterclass in what not to do. Within hours, Boycott Masons was trending, and their app ratings plummeted from 4.3 stars to 1.7. Local Masons franchises across the country began reporting significant drops in business. Regular customers were driving extra miles to fuel up at competitors, leaving notes on Mason's pumps. "I'll come back when you rehire James." Some franchise owners, desperate to distance themselves from corporate, put up handmade signs reading, "Locally owned, we support James." The crisis deepened when an anonymous employee leaked the company's policy manual. Section 5.3, the rule cited in James's termination, was revealed to have been updated just 2 months prior, specifically prohibiting employees from engaging in unauthorized charitable actions on behalf of the company. The timing of this policy change became another point of controversy. Peterson's rigid enforcement of this policy became a case study in business schools overnight. His LinkedIn profile, which once boasted about maintaining strict policy adherence, disappeared after receiving thousands of negative comments. Former employees began sharing their own stories of his inflexible management style, creating a damaging pattern. The corporate office's silence was deafening, as their stock price dropped 12% in 3 days. Over 50 franchise owners threatened legal action against corporate. Competitor gas stations started compassion campaigns, promising to match any customer's shortfall. 3 board members resigned, citing disagreement with current leadership decisions. The crisis reached its peak when an internal email from a senior executive was leaked, showing concern about the policy even before James's firing. These new regulations seem extreme. We're a community business. We need to maintain some humanity in our operations. The company's longtime CEO, Robert Mason III, grandson of the founder, was conspicuously absent during the crisis, reportedly on a yacht in the Mediterranean. His automated Instagram posts about living your best life during the controversy only made matters worse. Local Mason stations began feeling the impact. Customer traffic dropped by 60%, mobile app deletions increased by 1,200%, corporate loyalty program cancellations soared. Employee resignations hit record numbers. Franchise owners held an emergency meeting in Chicago, drafting a letter to corporate demanding immediate policy revision, James's reinstatement with back pay, a public apology, creation of a community compassion fund, Peterson's removal. The crisis reached beyond just Masons, sparking industry-wide discussions about corporate policies versus human compassion. Other chains began reviewing their own regulations, afraid of becoming the next Masons. As the company's reputation continued to crumble, it became clear that what was needed wasn't just a PR fix, but a fundamental reevaluation of corporate values. The question wasn't just how to handle a viral crisis, but how to rebuild a company culture that had lost its way. Little did they know, Margaret Windsor was about to offer them an unexpected path to redemption. One that would change not just Masons, but the entire industry's approach to community service. What began as online outrage quickly transformed into real-world action. Cleveland's tight-knit community, known for its resilience during tough times, rallied around the Carter family in ways that no one could have predicted. It started with Jenny Martinez, owner of the local diner across from Mason's gas station. She put up a sign, "Free breakfast for the Carter family, forever." Within days, other local businesses followed suit. Mike's Auto Care offered free car maintenance for life. The local pharmacy promised to help bridge any gaps in Sophia's medication coverage. Thompson's grocery store created a permanent account for the family. Cleveland Community Credit Union set up a special medical expenses fund. The movement gained momentum when local high school students organized a Fill Up for James campaign. Every Saturday, they stood outside competing gas stations with signs telling James's story, encouraging customers to buy their gas elsewhere. The teenagers' TikTok updates about their campaign went viral, inspiring similar movements in other cities. The local teachers' union, learning about Sophia's medical condition, organized a rotation of certified tutors to help her keep up with schoolwork during hospital stays. They created Sophia's Study Squad, complete with colorful t-shirts featuring her beloved Mr. Waddle's penguin. Religious organizations across denominations came together. First Baptist offered their community hall for fundraising events. Temple Beth Shalom organized a medical bill payment drive. St. Mary's Catholic Church provided meals 3 times a week. The Methodist Church started a special prayer and support group. But it was the children who truly transformed the movement. Sophia's classmates at Cleveland Elementary launched Operation Penguin, named after Mr. Waddles. They sold hand-drawn pictures of penguins, raising over $7,000 for medical expenses. The school's hallways became a sea of penguin artwork, with children adding encouraging messages for their friend. Local businesses began displaying "We Stand with James" stickers, designed by a local artist who donated all proceeds to Sophia's medical fund. The image, a gas pump with a heart-shaped handle, became a symbol of community solidarity. The Cleveland Civic Center hosted James's Justice Jam, a benefit concert featuring local bands. The event sold out in hours, with people paying well above ticket price to support the cause. During the concert, a wall of hope was created where attendees could write messages of support. "You showed us what humanity looks like. Cleveland takes care of its own. Mr. Waddles for mayor. Sophia, you're our brave girl too." The community's support extended beyond financial assistance. When word spread that Judith needed flexibility for Sophia's hospital visits, local work-from-home professionals created a job-sharing network, offering her part-time virtual assistance work with flexible hours. Even the competing gas stations joined in. Star Fuel, Mason's biggest local competitor, offered James a management position with full benefits starting day one. However, what touched the community most was James's response. He wanted to wait and see if his actions could help change Mason's corporate culture first. The movement reached its peak when Mayor Linda Chen declared Community Compassion Day, inspired by James's act of kindness. Local schools incorporated lessons about civic responsibility and human kindness into their curricula, using James's story as a real-world example. What made this movement unique was its sustainability. Instead of a brief burst of support, the community created lasting systems to help not just the Carters, but other families facing similar struggles. The Cleveland Cares Initiative was born, a formal organization dedicated to helping families with chronically ill children. As Margaret Windsor watched this grassroots movement unfold, she realized that the solution to both Mason's corporate crisis and the larger healthcare accessibility issue was right here, in the power of community action combined with corporate responsibility. The gas station that fired James had unintentionally sparked something much bigger than a viral story. It had awakened a community's understanding of its own power to effect change, one act of kindness at a time. In the Carters' modest living room, Margaret Windsor opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents bound in blue leather. The Windsor Pharmaceuticals logo, though faded with age, was still visible on the cover. When my husband Thomas and I founded Windsor Pharmaceuticals, she began, her voice steady with purpose, we had one mission: to make life-saving medications accessible to everyone. Somewhere along the way, after Thomas died and I left, that vision got lost in corporate profits. She laid out 3 separate documents on the coffee table: a detailed treatment plan for Sophia, including full coverage of all her medical needs through a special Windsor Foundation grant; a proposal for James to join Windsor Pharmaceuticals as Director of Community Relations with a salary that made him gasp; most surprisingly, preliminary paperwork to establish the Carter Initiative, a new nonprofit organization focused on helping families afford critical medications. But this isn't just about your family, Margaret continued, pulling out another document. Your story has given me the push I needed to reclaim my company's soul. She revealed her master plan. Using her considerable shareholding and patent rights, she was launching a hostile takeover of Windsor Pharmaceuticals. Her goal? To revolutionize the company's pricing structure and create a sustainable model for affordable medications. James, what you did at that gas station, it wasn't just kindness. It was a reminder of how business should work, how people should treat each other. I want you to help me build something bigger than both of us. The proposal was comprehensive. The Carter Initiative would receive initial funding of $50 million. A new division within Windsor Pharmaceuticals focused on accessibility, community outreach programs in every major city, a complete overhaul of the company's patient assistance programs, special focus on rare diseases like Sophia's condition. But here's the part that matters most, Margaret said, reaching for the final document. We're going to buy Mason's gas station. James and Judith exchanged confused looks. Not just that location, all of them. And we're going to transform them into something new. Community care centers. Gas stations, yes, but also places where people can access healthcare information, get help with medical paperwork, and find resources for assistance. We'll start with Cleveland and expand from there. She turned to James with a smile. And I want you to run it. Not as a clerk, but as CEO of Mason's Community Care Division. Who better to transform a company's culture than someone who exemplified true compassion? The offer was beyond anything the Carters could have imagined. But Margaret wasn't finished. One more thing, she said, pulling out a small blue bottle, the same type that held Sophia's medication. We're going to remake these too. New formula, same effectiveness, 1/10 of the current price. It's time to make things right. As James and Judith sat there, overwhelmed by the scope of Margaret's vision, they could hear Sophia's nebulizer humming in the next room. A sound that had once represented their struggles, but now seemed to whisper of hope. So, Margaret said, straightening the papers on the table, shall we change the world? From outside came the distant sound of protesters still gathered at Mason's gas station, fighting for justice. Soon, they would have something much bigger to celebrate than they could possibly imagine. 6 months after that fateful night at Mason's gas station, the transformation was remarkable. James Carter sat in his new office, the wall-to-wall windows offering a view of what was once Mason's flagship station, now the first Carter Community Care Center. The familiar gas price sign now shared space with a digital board advertising free health screenings and medication assistance programs. The transition hadn't been easy. James insisted on starting from the ground up, spending his first month visiting every Mason's location in the state, talking to employees, customers, and community leaders. He kept his old name tag in his desk drawer as a reminder of where it all began. His first major decision as CEO of Mason's Community Care Division shocked everyone. He rehired Peterson. Everyone deserves a second chance, James explained at the board meeting. Besides, no one knows better than him what needs to change. Peterson was assigned to lead employee compassion training, turning his previous rigid adherence to rules into a teaching tool about what not to do. The new Mason's model became a case study in corporate transformation. Every station installed a small medical information kiosk. Staff received basic healthcare navigation training. A percentage of all gas sales went to the Carter Initiative. Each location partnered with local pharmacies and medical offices. Emergency fuel assistance programs were implemented nationwide. But it was the little things that made the biggest impact. like the Sophia's Corner in each location. A colorful space where children with chronic conditions could find books, resources, and often a stuffed penguin of their own. The waiting areas featured success stories of families helped by the program, with Mr. Waddles becoming an unofficial mascot. Working closely with Margaret Windsor, James helped restructure Windsor Pharmaceuticals' entire approach to medication pricing. Their joint venture became known as the Cleveland model, proving that corporate profit and social responsibility could coexist. Judith took charge of the Carter Initiative's family support program, drawing from her own experiences to create a comprehensive support system for families dealing with chronic illnesses. Sophia, now improving under the new treatment protocol, became the initiative's youngest board member, offering the vital perspective of the children they served. 1 year to the day after James was fired, he stood at a podium outside the transformed Mason station. Behind him, the new sign read, Carter Community Care Center, powered by Windsor Mason Partnership. As he prepared to cut the ribbon, he spotted a familiar face in the crowd, the customer who had filmed his act of kindness that night. Sometimes, James began his speech, the smallest acts of kindness can spark the biggest changes, but it's what we do with those changes that matters most. The new business model was so successful that other corporations began to take notice. The Carter Clause became a popular term in corporate policies, specifically protecting employees who made compassionate decisions. Margaret Windsor, now fully back in control of her family's company, watched from the sidelines with satisfaction. The company's stock had actually risen since implementing the new accessibility programs, proving that doing good could also be good business. James still kept his Mason's uniform, framed in his office alongside the viral video that started it all. Under it, a simple plaque read, "Sometimes you have to break policy to keep your humanity." And every morning, as he passed the gas pumps on his way into the office, he couldn't help but smile at the new sign below the price display. Need help? Just ask. We're here for our community. The gas station clerk who was fired for an act of kindness had become something far more. A symbol of how one person's compassion could transform not just a business, but an entire industry's approach to human dignity.